Hi, my name is Haley Conley, and this is Occasional News, and today we will be talking about the Cuban trade embargo. Here at Occasional News, we believe that lifting the Cuban embargo would affect both countries in a positive way.
The Cuban embargo immensely affects the economic world of the United States and Cuba. Production industries like fruits are negatively affected. The Los Angeles Times interviewed a man called Chris Rosander, who last year toured a mango farm in Cuba. Rosander wanted to set up a mango business in the United States, and he wants to get his mangoes from Cuba. Mangoes from Cuba could easily be traded in America, but since importing from Cuba is banned, America has to get mangoes from other countries, like Mexico, Peru, and India. Another problem with trading with nations is indirect trading. If America trades products like China, and China trades with Cuba, American products are indirectly traded with Cuba and vice versa. To prevent this hassle, America and Cuba should be just allowed to trade directly, which is less than 100 miles away from the Gulf of Florida. Trading with Cuba is not dangerous. Cuba is part of the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, which North Korea and Iran aren't. The U.S.-Cuba Trade and Economic Council, which is part of WTO, has approximately 4,500 companies from over 100 countries import and export from them, provide services to, or have investments with Cuba. The other controversies with the Cuban economy is the two currencies. There are CUCs, or convertible pesos, mainly for tourists and the wealthy. Then there are Cuban pesos, which is what almost all Cubans are paid in and use daily. Lifting the Cuban embargo would invite a challenge to the Cuban government. The US dollar and the convertible pesos would need to be traded. The challenges would play into place when Cuba's reserve bank won't have enough convertible pesos to give America in exchange for US dollars.
If the United States opened up trade to Cuba, then we would see a shift in aggregate demand because America is such a large market. The increase in demand from the United States would increase Cuba's net exports, which would increase their real GDP. With the increase in GDP and demand, Cuba's unemployment would also go down because Cuba's suppliers would be able to produce and sell more at a higher price, so they could afford to hire more workers. So lifting the embargo would help Cuba's economy and people.
One of the acts is the Helms-Burton Act in 1996. This states that the embargo is official United States law instead of a proclamation. Another act is the Cold War Act, which prohibited aid to Cuba and authorized the president to approve a complete trade embargo against Cuba. The reason the embargo was put into place was to starve the Cuban economy and government. But that didn't happen, according to the representative, Tom Emmer of Minnesota, who was interviewed by Cuban Trade and its magazine, states that the embargo was enacted with the stated purpose of undermining the Castro regime. But the embargo has only empowered the Castro regime. Common sense tells you that the embargo is the definition of insanity. Cuba was allowed to join the World Trade Organization, otherwise known as the WTO, in 1995. This was surprising because countries that want to join the World Trade Organization need to be approved by the executive branch of government. Allowing Cuba into the WTO allowed that relation between the United States and Cuba were improving. America still doesn't trade with Cuba, but with Cuba being a part of the WTO, Cubans and Americans are hopeful that this will soon change. There are also special interest groups that affect the Cuban trade embargo. Cuban American National Foundation, which is an independent, non-profit organization dedicated to a free and democratic Cuba. The Cuban American National Foundation attempts to affect legislation, and in the New York Times article states that the Cuban American National Foundation stands ready to contribute our best effort of support of new U.S.-Cuba policy that advances the interests and security of the United States and helps the Cuban people in their quest of democracy and prosperity. The U.S. Agricultural Group is another one, and it wants to expand Cuba as a market of the United States, food and agricultural exports, and address liberalizing trade between the United States and Cuba. They will work to end the embargo and allow for open trade and investment.
Well, originally it was there to prevent people from spending the money that they earn in the United States to spend it in Cuba, so that it would hurt Cuban economy. When you want to book travel to Cuba, we have to ask you why you're going, and we have to give that information to the airline, and the airline in turn passes that information on to the governments. Even when the embargo was lifted, you couldn't just go to Cuba for beach tourism. You still had to qualify under 7 categories that they have for travel, so either humanitarian or educational, I don't know all the categories, but people thought that they can just go and travel to Cuba for a beach vacation, and that was not one of the things. People should visit Cuba before it's a big market, because before you know it, Cuba will be just like Cancun or Hawaii. It will be a mass market travel.
If Cuba was open to travel, would you consider selling tickets?
Yes.
My name is Haley Conley, and thanks for watching Occasional News.